Good evening. It is 5 o'clock. It is the 6th day of December. It is the 6th day of Vlogmas, and it is the 6th day of Jingle Jam, and I'm still wearing the hat, and I'm going to wear it to the end of the year. Still trying to get 250 subs, currently at 220. Don't think I'm going to hit 250, but I'm going to try. Anyways, it's time to do the year in review. Not the year of role-playing, but my personal year in review. This is based upon something I found on RPG video response community from Mark Richardson. So what would be my top 5 books of the year that I bought but didn't get to use? I think it's pretty obvious that I am a thoroughly converted fan of the Free League publishing product. I fell in love with Tales from the Loop when it first came out. I had the PDF. I was never able to get Tales from the Loop until recently because finances were so hard for me that just spending $50-$40 on a game that I knew I was probably never going to play seemed pointless. But this year, despite everything, I actually had enough money to just sort of spoil myself a little during the break. So I bought Tales from the Loop. I consider that my best purchase of the years. I have both the beginner's box set and the regular Tales from the Loop. I also have Mutant Year Zero, which I'm iffy about. I've done a review of Year Zero about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, what I kind of expected it to be, what my disappointments were. So I have the Mutant Year Zero. I also have the Alien Beginner's Box. Probably my next Free League publishing purchase will be the complete Aliens game, because I just finished going through that just with so many unanswered questions, and just as a universe that I used to love. And I love the old Aliens role-playing game. And I loved a lot of the stuff that you never saw in Aliens, but was always hinted at and was like talked about in the articles, and just that universe. Not the body horror aspect, it's just the fact that when you think about it, the xenomorph makes no fucking sense whatsoever. I mean, it's basically just a serial killer in space in the first movie, and then they just went crazy with it with the second movie, which Aliens is just one of the best science fiction movies ever. And then just kind of went, I don't know what we're going to do, but we have to make a third movie. But the first two are brilliant, and I love that universe. So I bought that. So that's the 3. Fourth, bought but didn't ever use is, pretty much everything I bought this year is stuff I didn't use. Probably Borrow Maze. The OSR Borrow Maze Mega Dungeon. Borrow Maze is a brilliant Mega Dungeon for just having one consistent theme and making 100% sense from beginning to end, which is so rare in regular dungeons and especially in Mega Dungeons. But Greg Gillespie's Borrow Maze is just perfect. So 3 out of my 5 Free League. 4th is an OSR product. And the 5th thing that I bought this year and never got to use is probably the Pathfinder Ultimate Equipment Guide. That's just great. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't pick it up earlier. It's just a great book for, fantasy. No matter what fantasy system you're running, it's just got so many good things in it. I mean, it's just lacking one thing to make it perfect, and that's the what table do I roll on table. To actually explains, when you. But other than that, yeah, I would use that for any game that even has random stuff, no matter what. So those are the 5. So the 5 things I bought but didn't get to use this year. My top 5. Now, obviously, my top 5 games, I don't even have a top 5 because I only played it really, unless we're counting video games, I played way too much 5e, I ran way too much 5e, and I played in a short-lived Marvel superhero role-playing game, and that was it. So I don't even have a top 5. If we're going to count role-playing video games, then obviously Diablo 3 and Path of Exile would round it up. But really, was a very, very dry year for people just trying to find anybody willing to run or play anything other than 5th edition where I live is just downright impossible. Now, I can't speak for anywhere else or anybody else. I can only speak for where I live. And where I live, it is pretty much 99.9% fifth edition. And if you even try to run something else, people just like freak out. I was very lucky enough to this year play in a short-lived Marvel superhero role-playing game, but it crashed and burned because obviously just players didn't agree on what type of story they wanted to tell in a superhero role-playing game. So, yeah, I definitely wish I would have played more games. I played in one experimental game where the guy said one, but I've talked about this before a lot recently, how the problem with that game is that what the DM said and what the game ended up being were completely two different things, and none of the players agreed on what type of story they were trying to tell. So it was just a lot of conflicting personalities. It was a lot of misinterpretation. It was a lot of expectations. It was a lot of you're saying one thing, but you're really telling me something else. And basically, so yeah, that could have been a great game. But the main problem was, one, communication, and two, the DM tried to run a game that wasn't 5e using 5e. Okay, so top 5 game books I've read but not played. Pretty much what I just said. Aliens, Tales from the Loop, Mutant Year Zero, Atomic Highway. Yeah, I mean, this was a 5e year, you know. So wanted to play more, but didn't get to play. Maze Rats, Knave, Into the Odd, Tales from the Loop, Tales from the Loop, Tales from the Loop, and Tales from the Loop. Also, I would have loved to continue playing that Marvel superhero role-playing game, or just gotten some superheroes in. If any year needed playing and running of superheroes, it was this year. Okay, so now we get to what were my top 5 role-playing moments of 2020. And of course, trouble with that question is if you weren't there, then what I say doesn't really make sense. I could explain, I did blah, 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 blah. But you're like, well, I don't know what you're talking about because I wasn't there. So what's my basis for comparison? So because I played in so few games and ran so few games, most of my top 5 as a DM, there were 2. At the right before, last month, was it last month? I think it was October, November. I managed to get out about 4 or 5 sessions of a D&D game with a group of people who had never played before. And that's one of my favorite things, especially if they've never played before and they haven't really watched Critical Role. Because then they really have no expectations. And when they have no expectations and we all sit down and sort of agree, okay, now that you understand the rules, what kind of story do you want to tell? And they all agree, this is the story I want to tell. And then we actually stuck with that. It was really fun. And one of the fun things was there's one of the players was running a barbarian, because why not? And because they had no real idea of what they could and could not do, they just started trying to pull off stuff. And it wasn't like they were trying to break the game or min-max. It was just like, I don't know if I can't do this, so I'm going to try. And that was always fun with me because then I would just listen to what they're saying and tell that person, okay, based upon the world as it works, you have to roll X stat or X skill at X number. And, it either succeeds or fails. And there was 2 times that this person really just, did some great stuff because they didn't know they couldn't do it. And the first time was when they were fighting a bunch of goblins and other things. And they said, well, can I just jump from one to another and sort of like Mario their heads, just boing, 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 and just squish them. Now, there's no first, second level barbarian getting multiple attacks. That's something you can't. No, the game that specifically says how many attacks you can get. And being able to Mario from one head to another head to another head is also like, yeah. But why not? Why not? I mean, so I said, okay, you're going to have to roll this number on this stat for the first one, and then everyone after that is going to get progressively harder till you fail. And then, the most you can do is and then we have then I think I said, well, the most you can do is like 4, just because of space. So that seemed cool to everybody. So they rolled and they made the first one, they made the second one, and they fell off the third one. So they Mario and just smashed 2 of them. And I was like, well, they're goblins. They've only got like 2 hit points anyway. So this is fun. It's different. Why not? And the second one was they had animal handling and they didn't really understand what animal handling was, so they just kept trying to make friends with every animal they met, and they thought they could talk to the animals and stuff like that. And then they're like, can I summon some bears to help me? And I was like, well, you've been running with this animal handling, talk to animal things since the first session, so it's sort of become your thing. So sure, you could try and get some bears, roll a d20 plus your animal handling, and we'll figure out how many bears. And they rolled natural 20. And I was like, okay, natural 20, huh? A dire bear shows up. So that was probably my best experience running, with just having a player who just tried things because they didn't know they couldn't. And I love that. I love that so much. That is, as a DM, that is just, the greatest gift, when they're not trying to min-max the game. They're not trying to break their game. They're just trying to try stuff for the love of telling a really great story. And they're like, I don't know if I can't do this, so I can try. What's the worst going to happen? A bear doesn't show up. I fall down, but it's fun and it's goofy and it sort of fits my character. So why not? And I love that. As a player, probably my best moments in 5e, again, going back to this character that I played in this game that ended up not being what we thought it was going to be. I wanted to just since I'm so infamous for running quirky skill monkeys and being placed, and sort of being picked on, it's like, why do you always run this character? So I was like, okay, so what's I'm going to just take that and run with it as what is the most quirky skill monkey character I can run that has absolutely no chance of surviving in the world that you've created, and just how far can I go? And I'm going to start this character with absolutely nothing. No equipment, no gold, no nothing. So I basically was running a goblin, of course. And I expected to die straight on. And the goblin couldn't communicate with anybody else because it didn't speak common. Or at least I let people believe I didn't speak common. And I started the goblin only with a burlap sack as its clothing. No weapons, no armor, no money. And just basically, if I found something, I took it. If I was like, we're in a bar, and I'm like, can I take a fork? And the DM's like, well, yeah, why? Why would you want a fork? It's like, because I have nothing else to use as a weapon. And for like the first three levels, I'm running around in a burlap sack, backstabbing with a fork, doing 1 point plus 2d6, and somehow this, and obviously my character was smarter than I played him, but I played off everybody's perception of quirky skill monkey. So everybody had this perception of way I was going to play this character, so that's the way I played it. But really, and behind the scenes, my character was actually very smart, very cunning, and very just getting things. And so without actually taking anything, I ended up with the most stuff. I didn't end up with the most magic items, but just pure stuff. I ended up, because every time they would encounter treasure and just sort of forget about it, I was writing it down, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and then they just sort of and I was like, no, I take that. I take that. Nope, I take that. I'm going to find, and one of them was like, I stole a thing of salt, and I just kept it on me, and I was like, since I was running an arcane trickster, I was able to have my invisible, whatever, carry it behind me, and then I got a donkey. But they were always forgetting what I had and how much stuff they actually had left behind that I had picked up. And then 3-4 sessions later, we run into something, and they're like, "Oh, if only we had some salt." And I'm like, "Oh, I have salt. You're not getting any." Stuff like that. But the greatest moment, I think, for just pure role-playing of that character was towards the end of the game, when it was obvious the campaign was falling apart. The DM was very frustrated. The players were very frustrated. It was just becoming this very caustic, combative thing. And we'd gotten to a situation where the DM said one thing and everybody heard something else. And I don't know why, but I think everybody was just so caustic and so toxic at this point and so ready to just kill anything that moved. That when he said one very specific thing, but like everybody at the table heard something completely different. So they all got just sort of wrapped up and obsessed with this thing that they thought was happening. And I'm the only one that actually paid attention to what he said. So I'm just like waiting and watching them get angrier and angrier and more wrapped up in what they thought was happening and having to do this one thing, which was not what he said. And then I'm just like, so wait, the castle's empty, right? Is what you're saying. And they're all like, rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, so the castle's empty is what you're saying, right? And the DM's just like, well, yeah, I said that at the very beginning. I just don't know why nobody's paying attention. And I was like, I walk over to the castle and I lick the wall. It's my castle, right? I walk in. And everybody else is just like, and they're not even paying attention. And then, 10 minutes later, the DM gets back to me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you think I'm doing? I'm robbing that castle blind. I am taking everything that is not nailed down. And if it's nailed down, I'm prying it loose with my teeth. This is my castle now. If I don't want it here, it's going out the window. And then for the rest of the game, I went around telling everybody I was a king. I was like, oh yeah, I got a castle. I'm a Lord of Theragush. And they're like, wait a minute, when did you get a castle? I'm like, you weren't paying attention. There was a completely empty castle back there. I claimed it. It's mine. And they're like, that's not your castle. It's like, yeah, it is. It's our castle. I'm like, no, it's not. It's my castle now. I'm retiring. So I thought that was like just the best moment of just taking a horrible situation where so many people were so combative and just like, well, fuck the rest of you. I'm still going to play this game until it goes down in flames. And what my character would do would take that castle, because that's the ultimate goal of a character that started with absolutely nothing, is to end up, at least in his mind, Lord. And it's like, well, I have the castle. Nobody else is using it. Doesn't that make me the Lord? I'd say so. I don't see anybody arguing with me. So until somebody says, I'm not the Lord, I'm the Lord. Start paying me taxes. So that was probably my best role-playing moments of 2020. So thank you. What was this guy's name? Thank you, Mark, for posting this and forcing me to address the issues of role. This was a horrible year for role-playing for me. I mean, the few role-playing experiences I had weren't very great. They didn't last very long. And the ones that were good definitely did not last very long. And mostly what 2020 did for me is just reaffirm my just utter dislike of the mentality of 5th edition, which is probably wrong, because I'm sure if somebody said, Mike, run 5th edition, I still would. And if somebody came up to me now and said, hey, do you want to play 5th edition? I'd probably be like, yeah. But it's just like so many of my experiences in 2019 and 2020 with 5th edition were so negative. And especially this year, it just seemed like 5th edition players and 5th edition DMs just wanted to just keep vomiting this bile and this expectations and this horrible toxicity of on D&D and on 5th edition, and just left me leaving like, I don't ever want to fucking touch this game again, because you've just sort of ruined the fun of D&D because you keep thinking it's gonna be something it's not, and just stop. So I'm hoping in 2021 we will get back to just having D&D games be fun again, and hopefully, God willing, people will be like, hey, let's play superheroes. Let's play space. Let's play Old West. Let's take a break from D&D. And I will be the first person to go, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Let us hope that for every reason, 2021 is better than 2020. I'm your grumpy guide to all things gaming, the OGGM. And if you appreciate this content, please comment down below. If you don't appreciate this content, tell me why by commenting down below. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please take a moment to subscribe and help me hit 250 subs by the end of the year. It helps me know what you, the viewer, want to see in the OGGM adventures, and it helps you know when the next OGGM adventure has been put up. I will talk to you bah humbugs later. Yeah, I licked it, so it's mine.